So welcome tonight. We're so glad that you could join us. We are excited about this program. We're going to be covering a lot of material, so I'm going to dive right in. We're going to be talking about what vacation rentals are, why you might want to choose a vacation rental over a hotel, what to look for when you're looking through all the different rental options available, what you need to know, whether you're renting through VRBO or Airbnb, and finally, why you might not choose a vacation rental and opt for a hotel instead. What are those situations? Let's start by looking at what vacation rentals are. In the very broadest sense, they are private properties that travelers can rent out on a short-term basis. Sometimes you're going to be renting directly from the property owner, and sometimes you're going to be renting through a property management company that handles many different properties. One isn't better than the other, but you should know who you are renting from and who you're going to contact when issues arise during the stay. And just to think of it, Airbnb and VRBO are platforms, and individual owners are posting their properties on those platforms, but you're not actually renting from Airbnb and from VRBO per se. The types of properties that you can rent vary greatly. They could be simply rooms in people's homes. And these are really the least expensive option. And they could be a good option if you're on a budget and you have really done your homework to make sure that everything is okay and that you know what you're getting into if you're just renting like a bedroom or an extra room in somebody's home. But that may not be for everyone, but there are other types of rentals. They could be an apartment or a condo, a studio apartment up to multiple bedrooms within the apartment. And you could get various finishes, various levels of decor and comfort. They could be entire houses, even vacation villas. They could be unique properties like the one pictured here, a treehouse or a houseboat, or even a yurt in some instances. So for some, this is part of the appeal of renting a vacation home. You can get a more unique experience than most hotels. But for others, this is a little less appealing because there isn't a standard that you are going to be booking. You're basing a lot of your decisions on internet photos, and those could be doctored, and other guest reviews, and whether or not you trust what the other guests are saying is valid. Both Airbnb and VRBO have similarities, but they also have some significant differences. And Mike and I are going to walk you through what you need to consider when renting from each of these platforms. Renting a room in a hotel is pretty straightforward. Most people are familiar with what you're going to get when you make a reservation, let's say at Four Seasons or at the Hampton Inn. You know what to expect based on the brand of the hotel. There's usually a little risk involved when renting a hotel for that reason. So why would you choose a vacation rental, and why are we doing this program? There are lots of reasons. There are several benefits to a well-vetted vacation rental over a hotel in some situations. To start with, when you're renting a vacation rental, you're going to have access to more than just a hotel room, like a rectangular room with one or two beds in it. There will be likely be more space that you could spread out. And there may even be outdoor space, whether it be a yard or a deck or a patio or something along those lines. Some of this extra space could be kitchen space. When I rent a vacation rental, I always rent like an apartment or a condo or someplace with a kitchen, so that I have access to the refrigerator or the stovetop, the microwave. It's a really nice option if you want to prepare your own food to save money, or because you don't like to eat out all the time, or if you have food sensitivities and allergies. It's nice to get up and make your own breakfast, for example. If you would like to have living room space, you can look for rentals that have a separate living room space with couches and a TV. and a separate bedroom. And this is especially nice if you're traveling with different generations, if you have kids that maybe go to bed earlier than you, or if you have grandparents that are coming with you. It's nice to have space for everybody to get apart from each other. When you have separate living space, that means you're going to have private bedrooms, and that adds to the experience as well. Having privacy and separate spaces when you're traveling with others with different bedtimes, it makes for a much nicer travel experience. If you're traveling with a large group, renting an entire home can be more economical than, say, renting 4 or 5 or 6 separate hotel rooms. If you're looking at vacation rentals as a way to save money, you may or may not be able to find a quote unquote deal. So you may be disappointed. I find typically that the vacation rentals I'm interested in are pretty on par with the price of a hotel, especially if it's a 3 or 4 day rental, which I'll get into in a minute because of the fees. They can be more expensive. So they're typically not less expensive necessarily when you factor everything in. A better reason to select a vacation rental is for the living spaces that they offer, because this can truly enhance your travel. Think family reunion or traveling with multiple families. Being in one rental with different bedrooms and different spaces is much more enjoyable than having everybody in a separate hotel room and not having the space where everybody can necessarily be together. In addition, it might be that where you're traveling may not have a lot of hotel rooms or any hotel rooms. There are some places where hotels just don't exist. You know, and being able to rent an Airbnb will allow you to be where you want to be, even if there's not a hotel there. So your destination may dictate your accommodation choice. And then finally, renting a unique property might be the driving force behind why you choose to rent a private home over staying in a hotel. You're just going to get something different than the cookie cutter hotel space. Since vacation rentals are not branded in the same way as hotels, you do need to do a little extra work when you're looking for your accommodations. And in this section, we're going to identify what to look for when you're searching for a vacation rental. Your search will usually begin with the location and the dates of your stay, just as it would if you're searching for a hotel room. And whether you're using Airbnb or VRBO, you're going to be able to pull up a map of the area that you're going to be staying, looking for, and you can see fairly precisely the available properties and where they're located. And if you look at the slide, the top photo is a screenshot of the VRBOs in Paris for next week, in case you want to go there. And the bottom is a screenshot of Airbnb, same location, and that's where the rentals are. And usually you can zoom in and even get more pins to pop up when you're looking at the map. One thing to note, if you that the VRBO just shows you the locations when you first look at the map. Airbnb lists the cost per night. Those are not the costs, the total costs. Those are the costs without any of the fees, and we will get into that in a little bit, but just beware of that. Because these are private residences, they may not be located in areas of destinations where hotels are typically located. They may be in more residential areas, but they also might be in areas where you would find your hotels. But you're going to want to do some research into the different places where these properties are, just to make sure that they're safe, that they're accessible to the things you want to do, or to public transportation. Once you zero in on the area or location of your rental, you can then begin clicking around the map, or you could even switch to a list view in both VRBO And that will give you a list of all the different individual properties in the area of the map that you had pulled up. You're going to want to look at pictures of all of the spaces that are in each listing, the bedrooms, the kitchen, the bathrooms, as well as the exterior of the property. And that's important for a couple of reasons. First of all, by looking at the exterior of the property, you can kind of get a sense of what the neighborhood looks like to see if it's a neighborhood that you think you would feel comfortable in. But you also need to know what the exterior of the property looks like for when you actually end up going there, because you need to know where you're going to stay and what it looks like from outside, so the outside, just to make sure that it feels like it's the same place as what's being pictured in the listing. The other thing you want to do is read the entire description of the space just to make sure it's what you're looking for. And if it is, both Airbnb and VRBO have save functions, and this is going to help you keep track of the different properties that you are considering, just so that you don't lose them. And then from the save folder, you can delve into more specifics of each individual property to help narrow it down a little bit more. So after you've saved your properties, then the next step is to maybe take a little look into the owner who is listing that particular rental property. And there's some information that you can get from each listing. The first thing you want to know is, are you dealing directly with a person, or are you dealing with a management company? The owner, you want to know how responsive they are, because this is critical. If something goes awry while you're staying there, you don't have the front desk or a concierge or a bellboy or anybody to help you if the toilet gets clogged or if something goes on wrong while you're there. And so you need to know how you're going to contact that owner or that management company. It's important to reach out to the owner of maybe your top 1 or 2 choices prior to making a reservation, just to see how responsive they are. And you can ask questions such as, if something goes wrong, do you have somebody to take care of it? Are you local? Are you long distance? Do you have a management company? Are they available 24/7? Should a problem arise? Those types of questions are things that you certainly want to ask the owner. Another thing you may want to check is whether the owner is a premier host or a super host. In VRBO, a premier host has met certain requirements, and in Airbnb, a super host has met certain requirements. And we'll go into those when we talk about each individual platform. But that's one way to vet that the owners have received good reviews from previous guests. Mike and I will both talk about these later in the process, but for peace of mind, sticking with these verified hosts is a good idea, especially if you're just getting started on the vacation rental foray. There are other things you can ask about. You can ask the host about specifics to the property. Something even like what kind of coffee maker is in the property so that you can have the right kind of coffee to make your coffee in the morning. What are the check-in and check-out procedures? A lot of times they don't send you those specifics until you've made your reservation and it's maybe 24 hours before you get there. But you can at least get a general idea whether it's a lockbox on the outside of the building or a code that you need to get in, or they meet you with the key, or it could be any different ways. One difference between Airbnb and VRBO is that while the hosts are rated by guests on both platforms, so if you stay there, you're going to have an opportunity to leave a review of your host. You can only see a composite score on Airbnb. So that's just one small difference between them. And then the other thing you want to know is that if you have to cancel or if you want to get a refund, you're going to be going through the host and not the platform if you've already checked in. And so you're going to be working with the host to resolve that issue. So you just want to make sure that you've reached out to the host to get a sense that they're going to be above board and, you know, somebody decent to deal with. So you've narrowed it down even further after digging into the hosts. The next thing you're going to want to do is to read the reviews. You want to read as many reviews as possible. You want to make sure you read the 5-star reviews. You want to make sure you read the 1-star reviews. But it's really important to also take note of when the reviews were written. Obviously, the reviews that were most recent are going to be the most relevant because an owner maybe has addressed problems that were raised in earlier reviews. But you do want to make sure you know what other people have thought about the property, what they've liked about it, and also what they haven't liked about it. You want to look to see if the host has responded to any of the reviews, because that's going to be a sign that they really care about what their guests think about them and that they're trying hard to maintain a good rapport with their guests. So that's a good sign. As I said, and for us, you know, whatever the original problem was. Having a host that is responsive is important because if an issue arises, you want your host to respond to it. So I can't emphasize that enough. I have stayed at properties, vacation rental properties, where there have been problems, and I've had very responsive hosts. We didn't have heat in one of our apartments that we stayed in, and they immediately responded to my text message, and I had the heat going within minutes. So you just have to make sure that you're renting from somebody who's going to do that for you. A property can look amazing in photos, but the reviews, you want to make sure that the reviews match the photos and that you know exactly what you're getting into. So fees and cancellations. So once you're ready to book, look through the fees and the cancellations policy of each property because they're different. Every single property has a different policy for each of these. They differ widely, and you want to make sure you know exactly what you're going to be paying and whether you're going to be able to cancel and by when you need to cancel. The fees can be significant. And on short-term rentals, if you're staying someplace for 1 or 2 nights, or even sometimes 3 nights, the fees can double the cost of your stay because the fees are the fees, regardless of if you stay there for 2 nights or if you stay there for a week. And so sometimes, a lot of times, vacation rentals don't make sense for just a weekend. And in terms of cancellations, both of the platforms have several different cancellation options. Some will allow a full refund if you cancel within a certain amount of time. Some are completely non-refundable, so know what you're getting into. Make sure you read that because it's not like a hotel where a lot of hotels have the same policies. If you're concerned, reach out to the host and just confirm that you understand their policy and that this is what their policy is. And usually there is some flexibility in terms of cancellations, but the policy is definitely going to dictate what that is. So you want to know what that is. So I'm going to delve into the specifics of VRBO, and then Mike is going to take over and he's going to talk a little bit about Airbnb. VRBO stands for Vacation Rental by Owner, and it was first started online way back in 1995, and it was really the very first one to define what the vacation rental industry was. Until Airbnb came along, VRBO completely dominated the vacation rental industry, and it set the tone for everything. Today, VRBO has more than 2 million properties in 190 different countries. So there's pretty much one almost anywhere you want to go. As I mentioned earlier, before making a reservation, one of the first things you want to look at for any listing that you're interested in is the host. And as I also mentioned earlier, it's the host, really, not VRBO, who you're going to be dealing with. And so you've got to understand how they manage their property. So what I have listed here on this slide is the latest eligibility to be considered a premier host on VRBO. And this is just to give you a sense of kind of what the hosts are required to go through in order to be considered to be eligible for this premier host status. The host has to have achieved a review rating of 4.4 or higher on average. They have to accept 95% or more of their booking requests. So if you didn't know, when you find a property that you're interested in on either of the platforms, you send a request to be considered for the property, but the host ultimately decides whether or not they're going to rent to you. And so it's kind of a mutual thing. And that's why you want to have a good rating with your host as well. So you want to be a good guest while you're staying there. But the premier hosts have to accept 95% or higher of their booking requests. And they can't cancel more than 1% of the bookings. So for inexplicable reasons, a host might be able to cancel, but they can only do that less than 1% of the time. They have to have had 3 or more reviews written about them on VRBO, and they have to have 5 bookings or more than 60 booked nights. These requirements are more stringent than they were before the start of 2024. So in 2023, it was a little easier to become a VRBO premier host. So that's good to know. Whether a host is premier or not, you still want to reach out and make sure that you ask them some questions so you can kind of see what their response is. And you might have some real questions and you want to make sure that you get them answered, whether it's about the location, the property itself, the check-in and check-out procedures, who you contact should something need to be addressed during your stay. And this is just going to give you that data point to their responsiveness. Remember that after you stay there, you're going to be able to leave a review about your host. And most hosts want to make sure that you're getting what you are expecting to get. And so they are going to answer your questions because they don't want to get a bad review from you down the line. And then after your stay, your host is going to review you as well or leave a rating for you. And you're able to go into your account to see exactly what the host has said about you, and then what you can see all of the reviews that you've written as well. VRBO is unlike Airbnb in that they don't conduct any independent background checks for guests other than whatever information you provide when you are registering to stay in a room. So just like I said earlier, you're going to want to make sure that you are getting what you expect to get based on the listing. You're going to start by selecting the locations based upon their where they're located, and then looking at the photos and perhaps the price as well. You will want to make sure the location is going to work for you and that it's safe. One thing to consider, unlike hotels, a lot of these are not properties with parking lots. And so if you're going to have a car, you want to make sure you understand if there's parking. If so, where is it? Is it in a driveway? Is it on the street? If it's street parking, will you be allowed to park on the street without some kind of sticker? Or, you know, like in Chicago, there are certain areas you can't park overnight on the street. unless you've got a sticker. And is there available street parking, or is it usually very crowded? I mean, just things like that, that it would be good to ask the host at the time. Go through the whole process that I mentioned at the beginning, reading the reviews, looking at all of the photos, looking at the negative reviews and whether the host has responded, contacting the host with the questions, and then make sure you know the check-in and check-out procedures. Whether you text the host when you get there or when the host is going to give you those procedures. And usually it's done through some kind of messaging system within the app. The next step, again, is to look at the fees and cancellation policies, because the price you see at the beginning is not going to be the price that has all of the fees built into it. And they're going to vary. The property owner sets them. They will be posted on the listing. It should be obvious and clear what they are. In terms of the cancellation, there's usually a tiered system, and you will have maybe up to a month before you get before order to get a full reasoning. The various VRBO cancellation policies. So one would be a no refund policy, and that's if you are guaranteed to stay in this place and there's 0% chance that you're going to cancel, then that would be an okay policy for you. The 60-day policy would be that you have up to 60 days prior to your stay to get 100% of your cancellation or of your refund. And then after that, you don't get any refund. A 30-day policy would be that you get up to 60 days prior to your stay, you get 100% refund. And then up to between 60 and 30 days, you'll get a 50% refund. And you can go down the list, that's all the way to the end. 14 days out, you get a refund, and then 7 days, you get half off. And then after that, you don't get any refund. And then you could also have a custom policy as well. So there's a lot of options. Just look at each property and make sure you know what your cancellation would be. Then when you get into the app, you will see, like, this is a rental for a week in Florida, this condo in Florida, and it's $263 a night. And it says it's partially refundable before tomorrow. This is for, I think, next week in Florida. So if you want to go, I can share this location with you later. So as you can see here, it says that for 7 nights, it's around $1,841, which isn't a bad price for a week. And it's, I think, a 2 or 3 bedroom condo in Florida. It's a pretty decent price. Just know that there is a strategy of some owners to list a lower per price cost, because you kind of get roped into it. Like, this is a really good deal. But they may have some pretty high fees on the back end, and you don't see those until you really get into it. So with this particular condo, once you add in the taxes and the service fees, you add almost $1,000 to your total cost. Some of the fees associated with VRBO bookings, there's a VRBO service fee. This does vary by host, but it's typically at least 8% of the booking cost. The taxes are going to be set by your local taxing bodies, so that the VRBO really doesn't have anything to do with that. Some properties are going to list a VRBO cleaning fee, so that would be the fee to have the unit cleaned in between guests. That typically ranges between $15 to $200. I'd say it's closer to $200. There may be a pet fee if you're going to be bringing, if it's a pet friendly property, then you're probably going to be paying a daily or a flat rate fee to bring your pet with you, because there may be extra cleaning charges associated with that. This hotel has done something that I think, or this rental has done something that I think a lot of rentals are doing now, and that's where they have this thing called a host fee. And it's not clear exactly what the host fee is. They don't have to specify. It could maybe is called a management fee. In this case, it's probably the cleaning fee and then something extra for the owner or whether it's the property manager on site or something along those lines. You don't really know exactly what it is. All you know is that you're going to have to pay for it. And so that's a little bit about the specifics of VRBO. I'm going to let Mike take it over now and talk a little bit about what you need to know when you're renting with Airbnb.
Thanks, Susan. As Susan said, VRBO has been around for a long time. They've been around since 1995, and Airbnb is more recent. They've only been around since 2008. But in that time, they've experienced this tremendous growth, and they're actually, they've surpassed VRBO in terms of the number of properties that they have, and they have 7 million properties now, which is pretty crazy. So there are a lot of choices between the two platforms. So if you want to do a vacation rental, you'll have plenty of options. As Susan mentioned, some of these options can include partial properties. VRBO only does full properties, but if you want something a little different and you want to save a little money, you can get a partial property. And what does that mean exactly on Airbnb? It means that you could have just a private room. So this may or may not have access to a private bathroom, but you might have a shared bathroom instead. Or you could share access to a living room or a kitchen, for example. Another thing that a partial property could be is a hotel room. I was surprised to learn that literal hotel rooms are available for rent on Airbnb. This could be part of a boutique hotel rather than something like a large chain hotel. So you're going to get still that kind of unique stay rather than a corporate cookie cutter stay. Or in addition to hotel rooms and private rooms, you could have a shared room. So this is very much like backpacking in Europe. Your sleeping area is shared with other guests. So kind of like a hostel, a youth hostel sort of vibe. So if you want to really maximize your budget, a shared room could be just the thing. So if we advance slides a little bit, I think we can see as far as hosts go, you'll have to do a little bit of detective work to find out if there are any red flags. This is because Airbnb's website is purely organized by property listings, not by host listings. As far as I can tell, they don't even allow you to search for a host to see what other properties they offer. So like Susan said, you need to read every review practically for each listing that looks interesting to you to look for clues. And you may have to read between the lines a little bit. So if there's a review that says, Mark was on site 24 hours and made sure our stay was satisfactory several times during our 4-day booking, that may mean that Mark was kind of intruding and making himself part of your stay more than you would prefer. So if that kind of thing might bother you, you should probably look for a different property or a different host. Susan mentioned the premier hosts on VRBO, and the counterpoint to that is the super hosts on Airbnb. And this badge is automatically assigned by Airbnb when hosts meet certain quality metrics. So like a 4.8 out of 5 rating, they can't be newcomers to the platform. And specifically, they have to have at least 10 guest stays or 3 stays totaling 100 days. They have to answer 90% of guest questions within 24 hours. And their guests, like with VRBO, can only cancel their bookings a very small portion of the time. On Airbnb, I learned a couple days ago that hosts have to pay a penalty fee on top of a refund, a full refund in certain cases to the guests, but they also had to pay Airbnb like, 25 or even up to 50% of the additional fee for a host canceled booking. So they're very much encouraged not to do that to you and leave you in the lurch. Superhost designations are updated quarterly, so they are reasonably current. but it's possible that maybe in the last 2 months, the host has really slacked off and their super host status has let them sort of um, carry on for a while on this borrowed time when they used to be good. So always ask questions of the host before booking to get more information, like how long have they been hosting, how many properties do they have, the same kind of questions that Susan mentioned on VRBO. They may not choose to give you a direct line of contact, and if so, it could simply be because they want Airbnb to capture their quick responses using the built-in system so that they get full credit for their timeliness. So don't be put off necessarily if they want you to go through the Airbnb app to get that. So in terms of properties, that's what we'll be talking about next. You might wonder what kind of standards Airbnb has before they allow them to be listed. Well, from what I can tell, there aren't any. There's no screening process before new properties can be listed. So it's on you as a guest to let Airbnb know very quickly if there's any problem with the property in terms of like it's not as it's described, it's not what the photographs are showing. In particular, you need to, within 72 hours, make these complaints known to Airbnb. Now, the host may fix the issue right away or issue a partial refund depending on the problem. And it's only if the host, if their solution is not satisfactory to you, then Airbnb will get involved to try to mediate the process. So just as reviews can give you insights into hosts, they can do the same for properties. So that's kind of the host. Now I want to talk a bit about the distinctive stays that are possible. Susan kind of alluded to this. One of the things that you want to do, or that might drive you to use vacation rental, is having a really interesting kind of place to stay. This could be a mansion. It could be a really uniquely shaped house. You can see a train here. There are many options that are way outside of the norm on both of these platforms. And it's definitely something that Airbnb kind of stresses in their marketing materials. They want you to have a stay to remember. So guest favorites is the newest way that Airbnb has of prioritizing certain properties. So this is a little bit like the superhost designation, but it's property specific. So if you have multiple properties and you're hosting several people at these different properties, you have 4 of them and you're a superhost, all 4 of them would get this little superhost designation on each property. But if they're a guest favorite, only the ones that meet very strict criteria will get that guest favorites badge. So it looks to me like Airbnb is trying to focus on the properties maybe a little bit more than the hosts nowadays, although you should, as a guest, be concerned with both things. There was an Airbnb Plus program where a host could apply for application to this program, but they have discontinued that in favor of this guest favorites, which I think is really great, because the way that guest favorites work is that the score or the requirements for this are tallied by AI every day. So you're going to get very much up-to-date information on whether a property really is the cream of the crop. And I think this is like 2 million out of their 7 million properties get this guest favorites. So you can imagine as a host, you would strive to do this. And if you drop off the ratings, you're going to want to do everything you can to get back up into that. So it creates this sort of competitive environment for hosts. So let's talk a little bit about the reservations, house rules, fees, and cancellations, etc. Susan, could you go back one slide? I just wanted to mention one more thing. This property here that I have pictured is actually in Chicago. It's a factory that was converted to a luxury home in the Logan Square neighborhood. And the living room alone is 2,000 square feet, and it has it has sleeping space for 20 people. So this would be a really interesting place, a memorable place to go in Chicago if you wanted um, to find it. So look around, you might find that one. I think it's called like Loft 606 or something like that. But that's pretty cool. So moving on to these cancellation and house rules and that sort of thing. So you want to pay very, very close attention to house rules because you're going to find critical information on what is expected of you as a guest, and you really want to follow these. They're easily found on the mobile site. On the website, it's a little trickier to find them, but whatever you do, make sure you read them. It'll have the check-in and out times. It'll have how many guests are allowed, the quiet hours, whether you have to take your shoes off when you come inside, what you have to do to prepare for checkout, whether pets are allowed, all this stuff. The reason this is important in part is because if you have a negative stay for some reason and you want to share your review with the community, the host can block or request that your review be removed if you don't follow the house rules. So at least if we're only to allow your voice to be heard in terms of reviews, you want to follow them very closely. Now, Airbnb, there was a question about this. Do Airbnb do a background check for guests? And yes, they do. And you may be very well rejected based on the results. So this makes sense to protect property owners from people that might damage their property or may not be able to pay for or things like that. So, of course, this could create unintended consequences. So, like, people have had stories about being banned because Airbnb suspected that they would be traveling with someone else that was already banned. So it gets into this kind of gray area where they have this power to ban you, and you're kind of left in the lurch if the ban doesn't happen until later on in the process. So be aware that you will be subjected to this, and hopefully they implement this system fairly and don't discriminate against you for whatever reason besides a good one. There was a story on CNBC about an Airbnb who was overseeing AI and how to spot parties, suspected party bookings, and to cancel them in advance. And she got the nickname Chief Party Pooper because she was responsible for identifying these by maybe the age of the person who was booking, etc., and whether it was in their home area, whether it was around like a birthday or something else, whether it might be a party. And they're getting negative publicity about parties, so they wanted to avoid that. So keep that in mind too. If you're planning to book something like an Airbnb or a VRBO for a party, you may be canceled. In terms of fees, cleaning fees have garnered the most negative attention. The vast majority of Airbnb properties assess cleaning fees, and these fees can seem pretty pricey, especially if you have a 1 or 2 night stay. So you'll need to just make sure you know what all the fees are and whether that jibes with what you're trying to accomplish. If that price is low enough, if you include all the fees, how does it compare to hotels? You don't want to be surprised by that. And Airbnb has done a better job over time of being as transparent as they can about that. Late in 2023, Airbnb has attempted to address this discrepancy that short-term stays, like 1 or 2 days, have by giving hosts the option of giving a short-term cleaning fee as distinct from maybe a longer stays cleaning fee. So hosts have the option to give you a little price break if they want to. And if they don't, you know that that's how they are trying, maybe how they're trying to maximize their profits, or they have their cleaning company doesn't give discounts, or there may be all sorts of reasons, but just be aware that there is the option that they could charge lower fees for a shorter stay. So the controversy about cleaning fees doesn't stop there. It also includes you may be required to perform cleaning tasks before leaving the stay, possibly including taking the trash out and washing linens and towels, or at least starting the washer. So even if you're paying this like $100 for your entire stay for a cleaning fee, you may still have to do some additional tasks. So just be aware of that, and think of your alternatives. Like, would a hotel make more sense where I don't have to do those things versus a short-term rental where I do? So in terms of cancellations, like Susan said, there are many different cancellation options that hosts can choose from. They might be very flexible or quite restrictive. So just read the fine print is what you need to do. Now, a final thing I'll tell you about Airbnb is about something they call experiences. And these are local experts who are offering activities or classes or tours, things like that, where you can really get a better feel for a destination by having one of these very bespoke sort of opportunities to get information straight from the horse's mouth. So if you're in Italy, you might learn how to make pasta, or you might go on a tour of pizzerias or something like that. If you want to use this in Chicago, you could take guests who are visiting from out of town to a pub crawl or something like that with a local Chicagoan leading the way. So these could be really ways to enhance your experiences. And Airbnb is actually promoting something called an online experience, where they offer some of these things over like Zoom. And something like this, I think, could be pretty cool if you have an expert, for example, who would help you. They'd spend 45 minutes with you and walk you through a possible itinerary, taking into account your preferences. And you could kind of say, well, I have kids with me. What kind of things might they want to do in your city? And then the person who's offering this online experience would say, oh, yes, you must do this, this or that. So this could really save a lot of time and frustration. So I think this could be a really great thing. For a relatively small fee, you could help make your eventual stay much more efficient and more tailored. I think it would be great. So that's kind of Airbnb. I want to talk more generally about some issues and pitfalls to avoid when you are looking at this kind of an option. There are many benefits, obviously, to choosing a short-term vacation rental. Like Susan was saying, you can spread out. You don't feel so claustrophobic. You don't have to say, okay, let's meet down at the breakfast place at 10 o'clock, because you're already in the same property. You have kitchen facilities, you have sleeping options for large groups, and unique properties that you won't find anywhere else. But you really, you should have the whole picture in mind, which includes some possible issues. So the first one I'll mention is varying experiences. So unique and interesting is one thing, but you could be like, you could plan a vacation throughout the South, and you could have a great experience in Savannah, but then when you go to Atlanta, your vacation rental could be completely different and not up to par at all. So it's not necessarily a reliable thing, but you might hit it out of the park and have a whole string of vacation rentals that are fantastic on your trip. So it kind of just, it's up to you doing some of the advanced work on reading all the reviews and that sort of thing to avoid any undesirable outcomes. You don't want to be in the case where you have, like in the picture in the bottom, where you have the nice home on the left and the right, and then you're next door to a decrepit, falling down sort of crack house. So that's what you want to avoid. And if you do enough of your research, hopefully you will see that in the reviews. And if this at all happens to you during your stay, you want to contact Airbnb immediately and let them know this is a problem, or contact VRBO and let them know that the neighborhood is not at all what you were expecting, and see what they'll do for you. So different amenities, there was a question about whether kitchens are stocked with food and or utensils. You would want to check the listing to see whether that's mentioned. I think in many cases, if a kitchen is offered, they'll have utensils and that sort of thing, pans to work with. But if that's a question you have before renting, it's not clear from the listing, check with the owner to make sure, or the host. House rules may differ wildly in terms of how much they want you to clean before you leave. So you can't expect to have an experience that's the same from stay to stay as you're moving through your vacation. So as Susan was mentioning, they're not always the cheapest option nowadays. In the early days, Airbnb kind of set itself up as being a nice, cheap alternative to a stuffy hotel, but those days are kind of over. You might save money if you're staying for a longer stay, and you might save money if you're staying with a larger group where you're sharing a space and multiple hotel rooms would really add up. But if you're looking for a real bargain, they're kind of hard to find nowadays. So I would say if it were a short stay, or maybe one or two people who are traveling, especially for a short stay, it might make more sense to do a hotel, whereas a longer stay or a larger group, do a vacation rental. At least consider them, because they can offer a lot of advantages. So more recently, since the early days, a large influx of people have come into the market looking at this as an income opportunity. So that kind of takes away from some of the mom and pop charm, I think, of some of these, because there are people in it to make money. They don't have that, personal greeting necessarily. So just be aware that if you maybe booked years ago with one of these things, some of that may be gone now. So the end result is what I say. Small groups, stay at a hotel, probably. Short stays, stay at a hotel, probably. Unless you really are looking for that unique thing that you can only find at a vacation rental, like a spectacular property, or maybe it's a special occasion and you want to do it upright and have the whole property to yourself, then by all means, it's worth the splurge. Just be aware that bargains aren't what they used to be. So another thing you want to keep in mind is privacy and safety. So the location of some of these areas, these homes, might be near sort of sketchy areas. If you don't know Chicago, you could see how an Airbnb might be maybe on the edge of a neighborhood bordering another one, and it gets kind of dicey across the street, and you wouldn't know that unless you were local. So that's something to keep in mind when you're booking for Rome or something, or Paris. If you don't know the city and how it's laid out and where the good neighborhoods are, you might not catch on to that. Whereas in hotels, they're typically in safer, more highly trafficked areas. A lot of these short-term rentals don't have on-site security. They don't have like policies that will immediately address stolen guest property. It depends on the insurance that the owner carries and that sort of thing. Oh, and there have been reports of hidden cameras found in some of these. I don't think this is a big issue, but it's something that has happened. And if that's at all something you're concerned about, you can look online for tips on how to spot hidden cameras. Again, I don't think it's a major problem, but I haven't heard those same things happen very often in hotel rooms, which are, checked over by housekeeping and that sort of thing. Another thing I'll mention is something called the Airbnb effect. And this is where the impact of Airbnb has changed the housing market and made it difficult for locals to rent or buy, more expensive. So as out of town investors or maybe even local investors are snapping up these properties, it's kind of having this effect of scarcity in the housing stock, and it can have a real negative effect on a neighborhood or a city as a whole. Melbourne, Australia is one of those cities where a lot of short-term rentals exist as a percentage of the total housing stock, and they're very concerned about this. So this is particularly the case in cities like that, and they're starting to take note. New York City, for example, has taken note of this and are trying to combat it. So I think this general trend of the Airbnb effect is going to be, it's going to continue to get more enhanced and more of an issue until something changes. Either the market says enough, or governments come in and make restrictions, which I think is maybe the more likely thing. So let's see, the next thing I want to talk about is the golden age. So we had the golden age of short-term rentals probably in the 2000 teens. That's when it was fantastic to be a host. It was fantastic to be a guest. Everybody was happy. People were making money, like as a side hustle maybe, and guests felt like they were getting a really interesting stay at a really good price. So it was fantastic for a while. But the problem is a lot of that was contingent on the fact that cities hadn't really caught up to the technology. Just like with Uber, they hadn't started to level the playing field between taxis and Uber and Lyft drivers until years later. And then once that happened, you see more price parity and that sort of thing, and more competition. So I think you're seeing that same thing with VRBO and Airbnb, where the prices, including fees, are getting pretty high, and it's just not quite as attractive as it used to be. So as a way of illustrating how it's changed, now only 26% of Airbnb hosts have just one property. The large majority of hosts have multiple properties. So they're looking at this as an investment, or maybe they started it as a mom and pop sort of thing, and then they saw how they were able to quit their full-time job and just focus on this. And now they're managing like 4 properties or 5 properties. So the flavor just changes a little bit. And, some hosts have thousands of listings. Like there's a company called Blue Ground, which has 400 properties in Chicago alone. So you see this in municipality and metro area over and over again. You're losing some of the thing that made it so great at first. That's not to say that there aren't still great experiences to be had, but it's just a little different. So cities are cracking down on these short-term rentals for a variety of reasons. That Airbnb effect on housing prices and availability. I think New York City did a study where they attributed a nearly $500 increase in rental prices across the city based on this Airbnb effect. So they're trying to protect their residents from this, and their potential residents, people that want to move into the city but can't because they're priced out because of the Airbnb effect. So that's something that makes them look twice at maybe putting more restrictions in. And another thing that is causing waves is this noise and disruption factor. When guests come and go at all times of the day and night, or if hopefully not, but if they do have like a loud party or something, you can imagine if this was happening down the block from you, you might be a little annoyed at that. Like you'd had a stable neighbor in that property for 20, 30, 40 years, and then all of a sudden it's changed and you have someone new showing up in the driveway every week. That would probably make you unhappy. And that's happened all over the country, all over the globe, really, where people have been unhappy in New York, Dallas, Santa Monica, San Francisco, Paris, Berlin, Barcelona. It's happening everywhere. And I found an article within the last couple of weeks that Hinsdale is looking at making changes and more restrictions on short-term rentals because of this. Their proposed solution is to require a 180-day lease, which effectively blocks the majority of short-term rentals from operating in Hinsdale, because most of their bookings are not going to be that long. They would be shut out. So things like this scrutiny is going to continue to happen. I think companies like Airbnb and VRBO are trying to be responsive and try to do things like do this party pooper business where they identify potential parties and stop them before they happen, so they don't get this bad reputation. But some of the damage has already been done. So in conclusion, I would say there are some great things that are out there, some really interesting stays that you can have. I mean, I would have loved to have stayed in a treehouse growing up. Like that would have been so amazing. And some of these tree houses are pretty fancy. Or to stay in a train or to stay in a yurt, something like that would be amazing. But there are some downsides that go along with that. You might be paying a higher price for that unique stay. And whether that's something that you're willing to do or not is kind of up to you. But like Susan said, the important thing is to know what all the fees are before you sign on the dotted line or click accept, because it may be too late at some point to cancel your reservation. So just be as aware as you can going into it. Keep your eyes open. Look out for hidden fees. Make sure you see those before you actually commit. And I think you can have a great time with them. Susan, did you have anything to add? Or were there any questions?
I have nothing to add. I was going to just thank everybody for coming, and feel free to unmute yourself if you have questions or comments or any stories that you want to share about your experiences. I've only had good vacation rental experiences. I was probably an early adopter of VRBO because we would stay at a place where we used to work with a realtor to find a rental place, and once the internet popped up, then it was all through VRBO. But I've had great experiences on both platforms.
Yeah, and I have nothing personally that I can say has been a bad experience either. I think you may very well have a great experience, and yeah, it can be an excellent option. Just be aware of all the possibilities.
Yeah, I do a lot of research. Well, thank you all for coming tonight. We apologize again for the late start and the late finish, but we hope that you were able to get something out of tonight's presentation.
And we will be posting this online if you want to stay tuned to the recorded events section of our website, and we'll be putting that up within the next week or so. So be on the lookout for that, and you can tell your friends about it, and they can catch it on the YouTube, on YouTube and on our website.
Thank you so much. Have a good evening.
Bye, guys.
Thank you very
Bye-bye.
much. It was great.
Okay,
Thanks.
thanks.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
Gordon.
Bye.